As is commonly the practice, Cabinet Lekgotla convenes every once in a while, in fact, annually, and specifically with urgency after a new administration comes into play. And job creation and energy security are set to top the agenda of the first day of the Cabinet Lekgotla of the Government of National Unity taking place today. President Ramaphosa and his Deputy President Paul Mashatile are presiding over the first meeting at the Sifako Makgatlo Presidential Guest House in Tshwane today. The two-day meeting is attended by ministers and their deputies, as well as premiers, directors generals and representatives of the South African Local Government Association. Samkele Maseko of SABC News as a reporter joins us now for this. What do we know about what is on the agenda of the meeting? You had sight of the agenda a little bit earlier. What are they discussing today?
In essence, what they are discussing is around the economic trajectory of the country. It's around the energy security, energy in the country, the procurement of the 5,000 or 50,000 megawatts of power that is envisaged to come onto the grid. Out of that 50,000 megawatts that they want to procure, they've got about 2,500 megawatts, which has been identified for the building of a new nuclear power station. And that is why you've got the Minister of Electricity and Energy, Dr. Ramaphosa, working with the Minister of Finance, in trying to find out ways of trying to finance this particular procurement of this nuclear deal at a size and scale that the South African fiscus can afford.
Yeah, a number of changes have taken place in the political economy of energy security in South Africa. The first of which is the Minister of Energy is now also the Minister of Electricity, as that portfolio has been amalgamated. But interestingly, when it comes to the money talk here, is that the president is now the shareholder, because there's no Department of Public Enterprises anymore. The president, through the minister in the presidency, Kumbutso Ntshavheni, are now the shareholders here. So they make shareholder level decisions when it comes to that. What do we know about the tone of the conversation, given that it is not happening in an excited state where load shedding is wreaking havoc across the country? There's been relative stability over the last 3 months as far as energy supply. The tones would be a lot calmer in the room.
The tone is a little calmer in the room, but what we do know is, particularly with the energy mix that South Africa is looking at going on forth on with regards to, you've got the Windows 7 of the Independent Power Producers, IPPs, that was issued out by the then Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy, Gwede Mantashe. It will be wrapped up by this Minister, Dr. Ramaphosa. But what we do know essentially is that the President has been very open-minded around the procurement of energy within the country, from independent renewable energy, which is mixed with the base load within the country. You've seen a change of heart from the former Minister of Environment within the country. That would be the current Minister of Transport, Barbara Creecy, in change of heart, particularly after the closure of Komati Power Station in Mpumalanga, and how that informal economy was particularly destroyed. So they are looking at strengthening the base load within the country, which is coal, supplementing it with the cheaper forms of energy generation, which is nuclear. You've seen the Minister of Electricity saying that Kuberg is one of the cheapest ways to generate electricity.
Nuclear has been a very controversial energy conversation in South Africa. We remember what happened to the nuclear conversation under the Zuma administration. Why is there a softening of heart this time around nuclear?
To point it clearly on this point, Oliver, the issue of nuclear during the era of President Zuma, it was at a large scale. It was 9,000 megawatts that was going to be procured of a nuclear power station that was going to be built by the Chinese and the Russians. This time around, it's been lowered, looking at South Africa's fiscal constraints that are currently there. It's been lowered to 2,500 megawatts. You remember that nuclear power station of 9,000 megawatts was envisaged to be built in the Eastern Cape province, around East London. This time around,
by Russian engineers. This time around, is it still Russian engineers?
The reality of the matter is that the Minister of Energy, the Minister of Mineral Resources and Energy in this country is vociferous in saying that they will not move in strengthening the economic ties with Russia, and particularly with the new nuclear reactors that are there, that are being built, are at a cheaper scale and lesser, and those are predominantly coming from the Russians and the Chinese. So the reality of the matter is, South Africa is part of BRICS. They will have relations with Russia.
Minister Ramaphosa has been in the job just over a year. He's only had constitutional powers as Minister of Electricity less than a year, because it took a while before the President gazetted that. But when he came into office, he promised us that Eskom would reach a 70% energy availability factor within a year. He's actually achieved that if we really look at it, because we're sitting hovering around, flirting with a 70% energy availability factor. Is there any urgency around any real drastic changes to our energy mix and procurement protocol at the moment, given that we now know that we can have a resilient and reliable energy grid?
The truth of the matter is, when you've got a project manager who's a civil engineer or an engineer by profession, they've got a basic understanding of engineering prescripts, what is required. They've got the right people leading this particular power utility. Look at the history of Dan Morkane, a chemical engineer by profession who has dealt with nuclear reactors in his previous life. So this procurement of a new nuclear power station is backed up by expertise in experience. Look at Dr. Langerman, who presented at the cabinet Lekgotla today. He spoke about an energy mix that is largely anchored around nuclear and how South Africa needs to look at that particular economic space in order to grow the economy of the country. And that tells you that the government is spearheading with its plans of a nuclear mix that is not only based on the base load of coal in Mpumalanga, but not also to close those power stations. And to remember, the Minister of Electricity and Energy was part and parcel of those who said you need to expand the lifespan of this old coal fleet that you currently have. You look at all of the 64 generating units that Eskom currently has in all coal powered stations. There's a specific focus on every unit. Hence, you've got one of the coal powered stations in Mpumalanga, which was one of the worst performing. Just about 2-3 months ago, it became the best performing power station within Eskom, with all of its 6 generating units performing optimally.
And a 90% strike rate at that. Samkele, thank you so much for that. Appreciate it. Samkele Maseko, SABC reporter.